business community grow every day. All right, so without taking long, I want to welcome Clarisse, the CEO of Hehe. I'm a moderator today, and thank you very much, Mitwa, CEO of MTN Rwanda, for joining us for the conversation today. Clarisse, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yannick, and Mitwa, thank you so much for making time to be here. You need no introduction, so we'll go right ahead and jump into this. You need no introduction, but if you can feel free to introduce yourself.
I'm kidding.
For the CEO of MTN. But we'll jump right ahead into our very exciting conversation. And just to get us started, we'd just like to hear a little bit about your journey, how you got started in the telco space, and how that journey led you to come to Rwanda.
No, thanks so much, Clarisse. And so good to see you. You've been such a great partner to MTN and a personal good friend. So really great to see you on the other side. I'm actually used to you being on the interviewing end, right? So it's a bit strange. I may throw some questions to you, so just get ready. And Yannick, thank you so much for the invite.
Sure.
And looking forward more actually towards the end when we'll get questions, because it's really just a chat more than an interview or a panel, right? But funny enough, you talk about my start in the telecom environment, and I'll have you know, when I first started out in school, I actually was enrolled in the School of Natural Science, you know, and I was studying subjects like biology, chemistry, and physics. And if you had asked me way back then, I would have 100% guaranteed you that I'm probably going to be a biochemical scientist of some kind. And, you know, given COVID-19 and the recency of everything that's going on, I'll probably be in a lab somewhere trying to figure out the COVID-19 vaccine. But anyway, lo and behold, as fate would have it, the school that I was enrolled in for natural science closed indefinitely 2 months into my stint there, you know? And it was one of those where we didn't know when the university would be opening up again. And, you know, I really wanted to finish my degree so I could go on and do, you know, bigger and greater things. So I enrolled into this University of Namibia. And at the time, because I was, you know, a natural scientist, I was going to University of Namibia, not really knowing what I wanted to do. Natural science was completely full, and it just so happened that computer science was the only subject or the only stream that was available. And I really wasn't sure if I wanted to do IT, if I'm completely honest with you. It was one of those where I had heard about computer science. There are not many people who were venturing into it. And I remember coming across the dean of that particular stream, and him saying how, you know, if you're not sure what you want to study, you know, studying a degree in computer science is really studying a degree in versatility, you know. You could study computer science and literally by the time you're figuring yourself out by year 4, year 5, you could do anything, whether it's in health, whether it's in finance, and so on and so forth. So that's how I jumped into computer science and graduated, and fast forward, got into the telco environment back in 2009, back in MTN Zambia. And ever since then, I've, you know, moved around different departments within the telecom space. And the beauty about telecommunication is that, you know, even if somebody is finance or marketing or sales, actually everything is telecom. You know, everything is technical. So if you have a technology background, you can dabble pretty much in any department. So I toyed around with a few departments until I eventually ended up in commercial. And since then, you know, moved to different countries, Benin, Senegal, Ghana, and eventually came here. And it's funny, you know how people say, you know, what you put out in the universe, you know, comes to life. I remember I was back in Senegal, I think it was in 2016 thereabouts, and I was trying to figure out, you know, where do I want to go as a next country? I had been in Francophone West Africa for the past 5 years, so I really wanted an Anglophone country. And I don't know why, but there are 2 countries that jumped up in my mind. You know, one was Rwanda and one was Ghana. I had never been to Rwanda before, ever. I didn't know what it looked like, you know, but when that thought came to my mind, I said, oh, let me figure out what this Rwanda is about. So Googled, you know, YouTube, and watched all these videos about His Excellency talking about the vision of the country and things like that. Oh, like, you know, Rwanda is probably a country that I'd like to go to. And funny enough, you know, I don't know how life works, but a couple of years later, I get this call that, you know, there's this opportunity out in Rwanda. Are you interested? And I promise you, you know, if you talk to most CEOs who take up expatriate roles, they always visit the country before they accept the job, you know. But for me, for Rwanda, I signed on that dotted line without ever having been here because I just had a really great feeling about this country. Yeah, true story. And I got here literally with all my bags packed, and that was it. And it's been great ever since.
Wow, what an amazing, amazing journey. And I would say your degree did actually prepare you for versatility. And you've been doing an amazing job since you got to Rwanda. And we just wanted to hear a little bit more about how you actually got into leadership and what's that been like for you.
Yeah. You know, if you had asked me a few years ago when I just started out in the telecom industry, you know, do you see yourself as a CEO in 2021 or even in 2017 when I first had my CEO role, I'd probably have called you pretty delusional, you know, like many people. I just wanted to be great at what I do, and well, I don't know if it's a good thing, but the thing about technologists is that you sit in your corner, you know, it's you and your laptop, and it's fixed input, fixed output. You know, if you vary the input, you're going to vary the output. So you're very much boxed into your expertise and doing great at what you do. So that was really me, you know, starting out in IT in MTN. Until someone literally hit me over the head, say, you know, I think you're great at what you do. Maybe you should be applying into commercial type roles, you know, lend yourself, because I wasn't really hardcore IT, you know, lend yourself into like product development and things like that. And eventually I moved through. And ever since then, for every role that I've had that has given me a bigger team, I've always just looked at myself as a leader of a bigger team. I remember my first CEO appointment back in 2017. And somebody asked me, so Mitwa, what does it feel like to be a CEO? I said, I've actually never thought about it. I just really look at myself as a leader with a big team. So I had a team of 3 when I started out, and now I have a team of 300. I have a team of 500. And I've never really seen myself as a conventional CEO. And I guess that's why when people ask me, oh, you know, Mitwa, what is it like to lead an organization of millennials? I say, I have no idea, because probably I'm a millennial myself, you know. I just lead the way I want to be led. So I typically just, you know, set out the vision, you know, and really get out of people's way so they can flourish. And at the end of the day, it's a formula that has worked over the years where, you know, I play a more supportive, coaching, empowering role. And to be honest, I've had a hell of a great time doing that. So leadership has been a journey, and I think it's an evolving one. I take every day as a learning experience, but do I really see myself as the CEO? And I know I joked with you before everybody else came on. Clarisse was asking, just so you know, so Mitwa, what do I call you? Should I call you CEO? I said, no, call me Mitwa. You know, CEO is what I do, but Mitwa is really who I am, you know?
Yes. No, I'm really just curious to know, because for a lot of people that find themselves in leadership roles, sometimes they will stumble. They don't exactly know how to go about it. How exactly did you get to a point where you simply define yourself as Mitwa and, you know, I'm just leading a bigger team? And, you know, the position of CEO does not somehow, you know, take over your whole identity.
Yeah. To be honest, I tried and erred a lot. You know, I speak very comfortably now about my leadership style, but it wasn't always this way. And I found I've tried and tested different things. You know, if you speak to the guys who knew me back in technology, you know, I think I had nicknames like Margaret Thatcher, you know, where I was very hardcore, only focusing on results, and it was all about delivery, not really caring about the individual and things like that. And that was in technology, because technology's got that, you know. Then I went into commercial where it was all about bells and whistles, and somehow I had to adjust myself as well. So it's more about, you know, emotions, you know, being intellectually connected to people and knowing about the individual beyond just the result. And I've tried, like I said, and tested different things, from being super results focused to super people focused and everything in between. And I've truly settled in what my leadership style is now, where I realize that once you know, set the vision, surround yourself with really great people, all you have to do is get out of the way, knowing that, you know, you've selected the right people. They're the ones who have the expertise. You yourself as a leader provide that visionary stance, and you provide the coaching and support. And at the end of the day, everybody else will do great.
Wow. Wow. Well, I'm just curious to know if that has worked for you during this entire pandemic, and what your views are in terms of the impact on your business, on the telco sector and the technology sector overall, as well as how you view the recovery journey. What's it going to be like? For the overall economy.
No, I mean, I'm optimistic. Well, I would say maybe cautiously optimistic. Only because I know Africa is so interconnected, right? And I think we've all seen that map of the world now that has the acceleration of vaccines, right? So how much have countries vaccinated their populations? And super dark green is those countries that have super, you know, progressed, and, you know, super white is where vaccinations have not started at all. And when you look at that map, you know, you can see the Americas, the Europes, you know, the Australias, the New Zealands, you know, really progressing super quickly. In Africa, you see South Africa, and you see Rwanda, you know, which makes us super proud. But the reality is that great parts of our continent today that haven't started on that journey of vaccination. So while I'm optimistic that the vaccines have come and vaccinations have started and countries like Rwanda are making great progress, the reality is that there are a lot of countries that haven't. So while I'm optimistic that, you know, as a country and as Rwanda, most likely we're going to start seeing that stability coming out of June, going to the second half of the year, lending itself into 2022. The reality is that because we're so interconnected as a continent, you know, overall economic recovery may be slightly slower. And you'll see it on imports and exports, especially where countries like ours are really, you know, trying to drive exportation of goods and services to also aid in our recovery. We may find the capacity of those importing countries to actually take on the kind of yield that we're hoping that they would take may be slightly stunted. So while I'm optimistic, I am very, very cautiously so.
Wow. What are your views on the impact of the pandemic on the technology sector in particular?
Yeah,
and your predictions for the future as a result of it.
But before I come to my question for you, because you have a really great story and you're in a really great space, but you know, I rewind in memory back to the 22nd of March last year, you know, when the first lockdown was announced and we had no idea what was going to happen. And to be honest, we saw a lot of interesting things, and I can share them very freely now with a smile on my face. We were not smiling back then because it was like, you know, crazy emergency mode. But you know, one of the things that really stood out for us was you know, the acceleration of internet usage. And I'll give you an analogy where on 22nd of March into 23rd, what we saw as telecom operators, as an example, is that in downtown CBD, you know, utilization of our network literally went down to 0. And then you have residential areas where, you know, utilization doubled, tripled, because everybody was working and learning from home. And if you ask any CEO, you know, a year ago or 2 years ago, would you let your workforce or your team work from home? Everybody's like, yeah, maybe it sounds great, but maybe not now, you know, maybe in 3-4 years time. But actually, we can do it. And that was one of the surprising things as to how resiliently we can bounce back from something as a direction to, or a guidance or a directive to work from home. And of course, with that also escalates or shines an extra light on the digital divide, if you will, because I look at the companies that have managed to sail through, you know, and at least managed to make something out of the entire crisis, as those that had some sort of digital framework going, right? It would be very difficult within the pandemic to start from scratch. So the ones that have, you know, at least had a digital strategy of some kind, or digital framework of some kind, or at least even equipment, let's even talk basic equipment of some kind, connectivity of some kind, are those that have been able to weather the storm a little bit more. So internet usage was definitely one that stood out for us very quickly, actually, back in March. The other space I would say is definitely around e-commerce. And, you know, since I'm speaking to the queen of e-commerce, there's no way I can speak to that. So maybe you tell us about how, you know, how your journey has been. And I'll tell everybody, you know, in front of everybody, I'm like the biggest fan of Hihi Mart. I remember from day one when I was trying to figure out, so where do I go shopping? You know, do I go to the supermarket or where do I go? And somebody sent me this link, and I've been your #1 loyal customer since then. But I'm sure you've also had a fantastic journey, right? Before I talk about the rest of the stuff.
Well, we've had a bumpy journey, and I was hoping to hear a little bit more also on the fintech side of things and how
Yes.
the pandemic has impacted that. Hopefully, you'll share a little bit more on that.
Yes.
But just to speak from our journey, yes, of course, we've seen an acceleration in online usage, in businesses wanting to get online, and in that sense, we've seen opportunities out of the pandemic. But again, like you said, in areas where there was no framework for some kind of digital, you know, connectivity or ways of working, that was really affected. And, you know, platforms like Mart were one of the biggest hits, if in case you don't know, because we had very, you know, supply chains were not as resilient as we thought they were. So we found ourselves in a position where getting produce from farms, from out of the city, products that are imported into the country, all those supply chains were actually impacted significantly. And we saw an opportunity to pivot, but I will say that there were some challenges as a result of that. But back to you, since you are our special guest today, maybe speak a little bit more on the pandemic and also the lessons that you have learned as a leader leading through a crisis.
Yeah, and you know, you mentioned something important about pivoting. And you know, when I talk about the story, or when I tell the story around the journey that mobile money has had during the last 12 months, honestly, it's really been mind-blowing for us who are in the industry to see, because of course we knew the importance of mobile money then, but when we went into lockdown and we started looking at mobile money or the cashless environment as a tool that can be used to decelerate the spread of the pandemic, that's when you realize, oh my gosh, the power of tech is massive, And just to give you some stats, it was really interesting to see. I mean, when we went into the pandemic, we had 2.6 million of our 6 million customer base who were actively transacting on mobile money, which is not bad, to be honest, given the general penetration rates across the region. But that, immediately jumped within the next 3 months from March until about June to about 3.2, And these are people who had mobile phones, but who are not using mobile money. And it's funny, you think it's maybe, people who are out in communities and things like that, but I have met very prominent people who have told me, you know what, Mitwa, if I'm honest with you, before COVID-19, I was not using mobile money, but now I am. So the activity within that mobile money space really, really grew. And the exciting thing about this actually, as we're also speaking to entrepreneurs, is the opportunity that presents. Because before, when you're talking, e-commerce platforms or platforms in general that were going to integrate with digital finance, the audience to which you were speaking was smaller. But now you're speaking to a 3.2 million, or at least on MTN, if you add the other operators, they're actually a whole lot more. Your audience is much, much wider. Okay, and then when we look at also the merchant payment space, which is where kind of Hihimat falls, I'll give you an analogy. I mean, when we started out in the year in 2020, we only had 1,000 merchants who said, raise their hand, yes, I would like to use mobile money as a digital form of payment in my shop, in my platform, or whatever the case may be, 1,000, By the time we were exiting 2020, that 1,000 had grown to 60,000, And that was really mind-blowing in the sense that now everywhere you go, which makes us super proud as well, you walk down the street, you can see that Momo Pay sign, you go into an e-commerce site, mobile money and other digital forms of payment are options for payment. So I think the whole discussion around is the cashless agenda attainable has been proven without a doubt within the course of 2020 and also into 2021. And I think for me, the more exciting thing is the platform or the foundation that we've built, off of which a whole lot more things will come. And last year, as you know, we opened up the Momo API, for example, where we said, look, that whole old school way of integrating with MTN, where you have to physically come to the office, physically sign a contract, before you can even start touching code and things like that, let's be done with that, because that was taking people like 3 months to integrate to the platform. I mean, the market would have shifted in 3 months, but now we're down to 2 days onboarding. If it takes long, latest a week as people test and onboard and things like that. And now we're thinking of things like marketplace, which will allow merchants to sell the things internationally. So the opportunities, I think, that COVID-19 and the technology advances that we made last year have presented are really, really exciting.
No, that's really great to see this exponential growth. And I wanted to hear a little bit more as well, just for our audience, for you as a leader, having to lead through a crisis.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah. It was interesting. I think as leaders, sometimes we tend to think that we are not human, but actually we're just as human as everybody else. When you cut my wrist, I bleed the same blood. But I realized, we're much stronger as individuals than we think we are. And I tend to, myself as an individual, I tend to, when I'm faced with uncertainty, really just double down and focus on what needs to be done. And I made certain very conscious decisions, and that's very silly ones. So I describe myself as an approachable leader, right? But everything that I thought I was before the pandemic, I had to turn up the volume 10 times. So Mitwa, if you think you're approachable, you now enter that staff WhatsApp group. You make sure you have those one-on-ones just so that people can see you and feel you. Because just as a captain or a pilot in a plane who people want to hear from when there's turbulence, is the same way during uncertainty and crises. People want that reference point in you as a leader. So there's no way you're going to be, a myth somewhere around the office that people don't see, but you have to be extra present. Now, obviously, all those things that I had to dial up as a leader, for me as an individual, I also had to refuel almost every single day. But again, I think the biggest lesson for me out of leadership coming out of the last 12 months is that, one, we're much stronger than we give ourselves credit for. I don't think anybody looking back the last 12 months could have imagined the things that we could have done, and we've actually done them, and we're here, we're still here. And there's so many people who are not fortunate enough to say that, but we're still here. That's one. And two, I think the last 12 months, I think even still today, is the longest lesson I've ever learned in resilience, right? And resilience, when we talk about resilience, we always we always think about how, coming back from a major setback, something catastrophic happened and I bounced back. But actually, as a leader, leading through uncertain times, you're resilient in the sense that you bounce back from little things every single hour, every single day. And you still have your game face on. At the end of the day, COVID-19 pandemic or not, one, you're still leading a team, and two, your company still has a mandate, right? So I still have a mandate to lead digital for Rwanda. I still have a mandate around profitability, shareholder value, and all of that. And irrespective of what the COVID-19 pandemic is saying about that, I still have stayed true to that. So as a leader, definitely a lesson in resilience, which, to be honest, every single day is still a school day for me.
Wow, thank you so much, Mitwa. This has been quite a great discussion, and I've learned a lot, and I look forward to learning more from you as a leader. But that's all the time that we have, and I see Yannick is already here, so maybe I'll hand it over back to you, Yannick. Thank you so much, Mitwa, and looking forward to seeing you do even more great things as CEO here. Thank you.
So this is
I received very early on in my career. It's still relevant for entrepreneurs. Is that one, you need to be 100% clear on where you want to go. Otherwise, you're not getting there, right? So what is it that you want to do? Clarity around that. And clarity or vision doesn't necessarily mean you understanding how you're going to get there. First things first, what is the vision? What is the dream? What is the big dream? That would be my first piece of advice. Second piece of advice, seek out people who have made a little bit more progress than where you're at today. There's so many lessons out there that are to be learned and shared. And I know it's sometimes intimidating with even big organizations like ourselves, but never take no for an answer. Knock down those doors until somebody says, yes, let me hear what your idea is. And we as MTN, and you know this, we always try to create those opportunities. I know it's difficult, but we always try to create those opportunities where we can foster those conversations. But my advice would be never take no for an answer. Keep on knocking on those doors until something eventually moves. Because for you to be moved to do something, it means there's something great in you, right? So don't dim that light. Don't dim that light, and don't silence that whisper that says you're born to be great, you're born to do something great. Really lean into it, and never take no for an answer, never say die, and keep on pushing on.
Wonderful. So we ran out of time, but Mitwa, thank you very, very much for your time. This was
pleasure.
An interesting conversation. Definitely, I will look forward to hosting you in person after COVID when things is better, because this should be an hour conversation. Clarisse, always good to see you. Thank you very much for moderating this conversation.
Thank you too. Thank you, Mitwa. It was a pleasure.
No, pleasure was mine, and so great to see you guys. Please stay safe here.
There, please stay safe. Have a wonderful evening. I look forward for that book. By the way. Thank you, guys.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.